In this video, we're going to focus on converting a hexadecimal number into a decimal number. The decimal number system is a base 10 system, and the hexadecimal number is a base 16 number. Hexa represents 6, decimal is 10, so 6 plus 10 is 16. But how can we convert a hexadecimal number into a decimal number? Before we can do that, we need to know the relationship between decimal numbers and hexadecimal numbers. A decimal value of 0 corresponds to 0 in the hexadecimal system. 1 corresponds to 1, 2 corresponds to 2, and so forth, all the way to 9. So 7 corresponds to 7, 8 corresponds to 8. Now once you get to 10 in the decimal system, that's A in the hexadecimal system. 11 corresponds to B in the hexadecimal system. 12 corresponds to C, 13 corresponds to D, 14 corresponds to E, and 15 corresponds to F. So F is the highest digit in the hexadecimal system. Notice that the highest number that we see here is 15. Now, the hexadecimal system is a base 16 system, and if you include 0, we have a total of 16 numbers. So just keep that in mind. Now let's work on some examples. So consider the number 23E in the hexadecimal system, so we have a subscript of 16. Convert the hexadecimal number into a decimal number. So how can we do that? The first letter E, we're going to multiply it by 16 to the 0 power. The second number, 3, going from right to left, we're going to multiply that by 16 to the first power. And then the next number, 2, we're going to multiply that by 16 to the second power. So we have 2 times 16 squared plus 3 times 16 to the first power, and then plus, now you need to convert E from a hexadecimal system to a decimal system. So based on the chart that we had before, E corresponds to 14. So this is going to be 14 times 16 raised to the 0 power. So now we just got to do some math. 16 squared, that's 16 times 16, so that's 256. 3 times 16. 3 times 10 is 30, 3 times 6 is 18, so 30 plus 18, that's 48. Anything raised to the 0 power is 1, so this is really 14 times 1, which is 14. Now 2 times 256, that's 512. 48 plus 14, that's going to be 62. And then if we add 512 and 62, that's 574. And so this is the answer in the base 10 system. So that's how we can convert a hexadecimal number in the base 16 system to a decimal number in the base 10 system. Let's work on another one. F7D base 16. Let's convert that to a decimal number. So the first letter on the right, we're going to multiply by 16 to the 0 power. The second one is going to be 16 to the first power, and the last one, 16 squared. So F, we need to change that from a hexadecimal value to a decimal value. So using the chart that we wrote before, hopefully you wrote that down so you don't have to keep rewinding the video. F corresponds to 15. So we're going to have 15 times 16 squared, and then 7 times 16 to the first power. And then we need to change D to a decimal value. D corresponds to 13. So this is going to be plus 13 times 16 to the 0 power. Now 16 squared, we know it's 256. And 7 times 16, that's 112. And this is 13 times 1, which is 13. 15 times 256, that's 3,840. And 112 plus 13, that's 125. So if we add 3840 plus 125, that will give us a final answer of 3965 in the base 10 system. So that's it for this example. Now let's try an example with 4 digits instead of 3. If you want to pause the video, feel free to do so if you wish to work on this example problem. So as before, the first one we're going to multiply by 16 to the 0 power. The next one will be 16 to the first, and then 16 to the second, and then for the fourth digit, 16 to the third power. So let's change A into a decimal value. A corresponds to 10. So we're going to have 10 times 16 to the third power. Next, we need to change B. So B corresponds to 11. So this is going to be 11 times 16 squared. And then we have 0 times 16 to the first power, and then 9 times 16 to the 0 power. Now 16 to the third power, that's 16 times 16 times 16. So that's 4,096. 16 squared, we know it's 256. 0 times anything is 0, and 16 to the 0 power is 1, so 9 times 1 is 9. Now 10 times 4,096 is 40,960. You just need to add a 0 to that number. 11 times 256, that's going to be 2,816, and then plus 9. So let's go ahead and add up these three numbers. So this will give you 43,785 as the final answer. Now let's try a 5-digit example. D3E5C base 16. Go ahead and work on that example. So we're going to multiply the first one by 16 to the 0, and then the second one by 16 to the first, and then 16 squared, and then 16 to the third, and for the fifth digit, it's going to be 16 to the fourth. So let's begin by converting D into its decimal value. So D corresponds to 13. Thus we're going to have 13 times 16 to the fourth power. And then the next number is 3. So it's going to be 3 times 16 to the third. And then we have E. So that's going to be E, not E, we got to change that. E corresponds to 14. So it's 14 times 16 squared. And then it's going to be 5 times 16 to the first power. And then we need to change C. So C corresponds to 12. So it's 12 times 16 to the 0 power. 16 to the fourth power. If you multiply 16 4 times, it's going to be 65,536. And then 16 to the third power, in the last example, we saw that it was 4,096. 16 squared is 256. 5 times 16 is 80. 12 times 1 is 12. Now let's multiply 65,536 by 13. And so that's going to be 851,968. And then it's 3 times 4,096, which is 12,288. And then we have 14 times 256. So that's 3,584. And then 80 plus 12 is 92. So let's add these numbers. So the total sum that you should now have is 867,932. And so this is the final answer for this example. Now let's consider one more example. So let's say if we have a fractional hexadecimal number. So as you can see, we have a decimal point. How can we convert this into a base 10 number? So go ahead and try this problem. Well, we know the first digit to the left of the decimal point is going to be multiplied by 16 to the 0 power. And then the next one is 16 to the first, and then 16 to the second power. But what about the digits to the right of the decimal point? Well, notice the exponents. As you go from left to right, they're decreasing. the next integer less than 0 is -1. So we're going to multiply c by 16 to the -1 and 8 by 16 to the -2. So let's write this out. So we have 3 times 16 squared, and then let's change b to its decimal value. B corresponds to 11, so that's 11 times 16 to the first power, and then plus 4 times 16 to the 0 power. Now we need to change c. C corresponds to 12, the next number beyond 11, because c comes after b. And so that's going to be 12 times 16 to the -1, and then 8 times 16 to the -2. Now, 16 squared is 256. So we're multiplying 3 by 256. And then 11 times 16, that's 176. And then we have 4 times 1, which is 4. Now, what do we do here? It's important to understand that 16 to the -1 is basically 1 over 16. So what we're doing is we're dividing. We're going to take 12 and divide it by 16. And now 16 to the -2, that's 1 over 16 squared, which is the same as 1 over 256. And so we're going to divide 8 by 256. So this is going to be plus 8 divided by 256. 3 times 256 is 768. And then if we add 176 plus 4, that's going to be 180. Now 12 divided by 16 as a decimal, that's 0.75. And then 8 divided by 256 as a decimal, that's 0.03125. So let's go ahead and add these numbers. And so you should get 948.78125. And this is in the base 10 system. So that's how you can convert a fractional hexadecimal value into a decimal value. Thanks for watching.